This lesson is about the signs and visions at the midpoint of the tribulation in the book of Revelation, covering mostly chapters 12 through 14. And as stated in the description of this video, the contents are identified as signs. And so this indicates that not everything in Revelation is to be taken symbolically or allegorically. Otherwise, they wouldn't be called signs. There's no point in saying, well, these are signs if they're all signs. And remember that signs point to realities, not just concepts or ideals. And these signs at the midpoint point both forward and backward about things that have been happening or will happen in Revelation. We're going to start here with chapter 12 on the left, and I'm going to read the first paragraph, first two verses, and then we'll look at the reference to that in the Old Testament. It says, "Then a great sign was seen in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon beneath her feet, and a victor's crown of 12 stars on her head." She's pregnant and crying out because of the torture of labor pains as she's given birth. Genesis 37:9-11 is part of the account of the patriarch Joseph, who was known for his dreams, which made his brothers hate him, and the fact that he was favored by his father. It says, starting in verse 9, "Then he had another dream and told it to his brothers," which was a big mistake. "Look," he said, "I had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father and his brothers, his father rebuked him, saying, "What is this dream that you had? Will I, your mother, and your brothers really come and bow down to you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept in mind what Joseph said. Now, of course, this is what exactly happened when Joseph had been later sold into Egypt and then rose to power, and his people were suffering a famine and came and bowed down to him, and eventually his father and mother and all his brothers did. So this was a prophecy. Now, when we read this in the 12th chapter of Revelation, we can see exactly what it's referencing. The woman is Israel. The sun is the patriarch, Joseph's father. The moon is his mother. And the other 11 stars are his brothers, and he is the 12th. So this is to indicate without any doubt that this vision is about Israel. And she gives birth, as it says later, to a child who would be snatched up to heaven. And remember that it's the church that was the child of Israel, not the other way around, and that Jesus was the source of the church later to come. But the symbolism here is that Israel produced the Messiah. That's what this is about. And then it says, another sign was seen in heaven. This is verse 3 in Revelation 12. And it says, "There was a huge fiery dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, with each head wearing a royal crown. Its tail dragged a third of the stars of the sky and threw them onto the earth. It stood before the woman with the intention of consuming the child as soon as it was born. She gave birth to a male child who was to shepherd all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was snatched up to God and his throne, and the woman fled into the desert where there was a place prepared by God. There they will nourish her for 1,260 days. So the dragon was waiting for the Messiah to come around so the Messiah could be destroyed. But that's not how it worked out. But the phrase, shepherd all the nations with a rod of iron, is another Old Testament reference to what the Messiah would do. So there's no doubt as to what the symbolism means. And the stars, 1/3 swept by the dragon's tail, indicate that 1/3 of all the angels were hoodwinked by Satan and decided to follow him. But they made a free choice. I mean, how fooled could they be that there was only one God? So it was a free choice. So maybe hoodwinked isn't the best term, but convinced 1/3 of the angels to follow him. And that's what that signifies. And then it says there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but they were not strong enough, and there was no more place for them in heaven. So the great dragon, the ancient serpent, called the devil and Satan, who misleads the whole inhabited world, was thrown along with his angels to the earth. That was verses 7 through 9. And we know that after Lucifer's departure as an angel of God, although that by creation he can't change that nature, but no longer in good standing, obviously. And so that made the head angel, the archangel, Michael, and there's also Gabriel. But I'm not going to get into the whole angelology topic right now. Anyway, Michael led the angelic war against the dragon, and being no more place for them simply refers to the fact that, as we can see in the early chapters of Job, that Satan still has access to the throne of God to accuse all of God's followers, and that Jesus is our advocate. Since Jesus came, he is and went to heaven again, he is our advocate. So it's a courtroom kind of a scene, but at some point, he will be at the midpoint of the tribulation, he will be no longer allowed access to heaven because of the loss in this war. And after this event, in verse 10, it says, "And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now salvation, power, and the kingdom of our God has arrived, as well as the authority of his Christ, because the accuser of our sisters and brothers, the one who accused them before God day and night, has been thrown out. They conquered him by means of the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, even to the point of giving up their lives. On account of this, be happy, all you who live in heaven. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you and is filled with great rage, seeing that his time is short." Now when the dragon, verse 13, saw that it had been thrown down to the earth, it pursued the woman that had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she could fly from the presence of the serpent into the desert. She was taken to the place prepared for her to be nourished for a time, times, and half a time. And that's through verse 14. So pursuing the woman means that the dragon, Satan, who is unequivocally identified by all the list of terms. So this is the serpent, this is the shining one from Genesis, the dragon, and the accuser, the devil, all of these various names for the same entity. And he pursues Israel because they gave birth to the Messiah. And so he goes after it, I should say, because it's neuter in the Greek, pursues the woman, but she is given 2 wings to a great eagle. And people like to say this is the United States. They forget or don't know or don't care to know that Rome also had the eagle as a symbol. But neither of these really fit very well. It simply means, as an expression, the wings of a great eagle, to be carried swiftly away. That's really all it means. And so she escaped the pursuit of the beast and its armies and was taken to a safe place for the second half of the tribulation. So these visions are happening at the midpoint, after the trumpet judgments and before the bowl judgments begin. And so this is the point where those who see the abomination of desolation, we'll read about that in a minute, are to flee Jerusalem and Judea and go to this prepared place. And the times, and half a time should be familiar from Daniel, also equivalent to 42 months or 3.5 years, which is the second half of the tribulation in this case, that Israel, whoever is faithful and runs away, will be cared for and protected. Now, in spite of this, the serpent still tries things. In verse 15, the serpent shot out from its mouth water like a river, so it would carry her off, I guess I'll read this first and then go back and comment. But the earth helped the woman and opened up its mouth to swallow the river that the dragon had shot out of its mouth. The dragon then went off in a rage and prepared to do battle with the rest of her offspring, who guard the injunctions of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus, and it stood on the seashore. So many commentators take this river as being that the dragon has sent armies after Israel in spite of the fact that they had gone to a safe place. But somehow the earth swallows up this pursuing army in much like the armies of Pharaoh were swallowed up by the Red Sea. And so the dragon finally gives up and then turns off in a rage to pursue the rest of her children. Now, who are they? The most direct meaning would be the rest of the Jews, the Israelites, who didn't run away, who weren't faithful. So he's going to go take off after them. And standing on the seashore, who knows exactly what that means? There's a lot of speculation about that. Now we go to chapter 13. Then I saw a beast rise out of the sea. And the sea, I'll just say real quickly here, usually in the Bible signifies the nations that are not Israel, whereas the land indicates Israel. I saw a beast right out of the sea, and it had 10 horns and 7 heads. On each horn was a royal crown, and on each head was a slanderous name, or blasphemous name. This beast was like a leopard with a bear's paws and a lion's mouth. The dragon gave this beast his power, his throne, and wide-ranging authority. One of the beast's heads appeared to have sustained a mortal wound, but was healed. The whole earth was astounded at the beast, and they worshipped the dragon for giving authority to it. They said, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight it?" The beast was given a mouth with which to speak outrageous and slanderous things, and its authority would be for 42 months. It opened up its mouth to slander God and his name and his sanctuary and all who live in heaven, and it was allowed to do battle with the holy people and conquer them, as well as to have authority over all tribes, people groups, languages, and nations. All the earth dwellers will worship it, whose names have not been written in the scroll of life of the Lamb, who had been slaughtered from the establishment of the world. So that's 2 paragraphs, but we'll go back a little bit. We've already explained about the sea, and we've seen before in earlier lessons about the 10 horns and 7 heads. So this is after the beast has defeated 3 of the other kings of the 10. And this description is, of course, reminiscent of what we've seen in Daniel. And it encompasses all the imperial governments, so to speak, and kingdoms of the past. And they're all rolled into this one. And the one that had sustained the mortal wound was, of course, indicating that the Antichrist was killed and then rose again and then defeated the other 3 of the others. And then everybody openly worships Satan. This is what they mean by the dragon. And the beast being the equivalent of the dragon's Messiah, this unholy trinity. And 42 months is the reign, and then it says in verse 9, "Whoever has an ear had better listen. If anyone is to go into captivity, they will be taken. If anyone is to be killed with a sword, they will be killed. Such is the endurance and faith of the holy people." There will be people turning to God during this time, and those are the ones who need to endure to the end. Now we have another beast from the earth. And remember what that means. Verse 11, "Then I saw another beast ascending out of the earth, and it had 2 horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. It wields all the authority of the first beast, and makes all the earth dwellers worship it, the one that was healed of the fatal wound. It does great miraculous signs, such as making fire fall from the sky to the earth in front of everyone, and it misleads the earth dwellers through the signs it was given to do in the presence of the first beast. It told them to make an image of the beast that had the fatal wound, but lived. It was allowed to give spirit to the image of the beast so that it could talk, and to put to death anyone who would refuse to worship the image. It also forces everyone, small or great, rich or poor, free or slave, to accept an inscription on their right hand or forehead. No one will be able to buy or sell without having the inscription of either the name or the number of the beast. This takes wisdom. Let the one with insight compute the number of the beast, because it is the number of a person. The number is 666. So that's all the rest of that chapter, starting in verse 11. So the beast is out of the earth, the one that looks like a lamb but talks like a dragon. And it is the equivalent in the unholy trinity. This would be more like the Holy Spirit, the religious leader. And it causes everyone to worship its unholy Antichrist and unholy, quote-unquote, father. And it can do all these miraculous things, make fire come down from heaven, and it misleads people. who were had rejected the truth of the gospel, and so they will believe this great lie that this is in fact the real God and the real Christ. And so it has them make this image, and this is where we get the mark of the beast. Everyone who takes the mark is also having to worship the image, and as a part of that worship, you must have this inscription, which in Greek the word is primarily means something etched, more like a tattoo than anything else. Although there's, of course, latitude, we don't know exactly how that relates to the actual mark, but it is etched. That's all we know. And in one of two particular places, the forehead or the back of the right hand. And so you can't do commerce without it. Now, this is not your personal ID. It's the beast name or the beast number, not yours. But in order to do any transaction anywhere, you must display this mark of loyalty to the beast. Now, for the number and name of the beast, we're given the number 666. Now, I have noted that in the Greek, all of those, it takes 3 words to say this, of course, and they all begin with X, or hex if you use the rough breathing mark, hex, hex, hex. These at least speculating now, they sound in English like the letter X, and we see a lot of X things these days. There's X-Men, there's X, the social platform, there's Space X. I don't think that's an accident. It could be, pure speculation, it could be that the actual solution to this problem, this mystery or riddle, if you will, is that the name of the beast will be XXX, or at least signified by that. It's a simple mark, and it would be recognizable, and the triple is an unholy trinity. So it seems to me that it's possible that the actual name of the beast will be XXX. Maybe it's something else, I don't know. Nobody knows. But it's just a thought. If you look at Greek, which the New Testament was written in, that XXX makes a lot of sense. At any rate, this was all done by the second beast. And now we're going to go to chapter 14. And we'll see the 144,000 and the Lamb. Then suddenly I saw the Lamb on Mount Zion, that's in Israel, and with him were 144,000 people with his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard the sound coming from the sky. It was like the noise of a lot of rushing water or loud thunder. It seemed to be harpists playing their harps, and they're singing a new song before the throne, the 4 creatures, and the elders. No one could learn the song except for the 144,000 who were bought from the earth. These are the ones who were not polluted among women, for they are unmarried. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes, having been bought from mankind as a first harvest to God and to the Lamb. No deceit was found in them because they're flawless. And that's through verse 5. Now I just have a footnote here that we'll go check. Bought from, among, or with, or had not polluted themselves among or with is the question, because both are possible meanings. But among fits better, since the word for unmarried or virgin is almost exclusively used for females. If part of the significance of the 12,000 from each tribe is a reference to a military force, which is quite possible, it should be noted that one requirement for Jewish soldiers going into battle was sexual purity, and you can reference that in Deuteronomy 23:9 and 10, and 1 Samuel 21:5, and 2 Samuel 11:11. This is consistent with the overall purity theme in Revelation. Just to make that note about why it is that people wonder why they would have to be virgins. So it could be that they haven't defiled themselves with women, or they were undefiled among women. You could take that either way. So the point is not that God is some kind of misogynist. It's that these are Israelite tribes, and we're going to see more about that we already saw those details back in chapter 7. And that now we haven't heard anything about them since chapter 7. Here we are in chapter 14, and all we know is that this group of people, they are following the Lamb wherever he goes, and they're on Mount Zion. And so it also says no deceit was found in them, and they're flawless. So they are a first harvest, an early harvest to God. It doesn't mean they're the part of the church or are the church or any kind of Gentiles, because it was very clear in chapter 7 that these are from the 12 tribes of Israel. And that's all we know about them. Many speculate that they're serving as witnesses to the real God during the first half of the tribulation. But we don't know. That's all speculation. You can use the resources under the video description to pursue much more detail for these things. Then it says, I saw in verse 6 in Revelation 14, I saw another angel flying in midair, having the ageless good news to bring to those on the earth, the nations of every tribe and language and people group. The angel announced loudly, fear God and give him honor, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship the one who made the sky and earth and the sea and the springs of water. A second angel followed. Fallen is Babylon the Great, that made all the nations drink the wine of the fury of its harlotry. A third angel followed. If anyone worships the beast and its image, and takes its inscription on their forehead or right hand, they will drink the wine of the fury of God, mixed full strength with his rage, and will be tortured in fire and sulfur before the angels of the holy people and the Lamb. The smoke of their torture rises forever. There's no relief day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, and who take the inscription of its name. This requires the endurance and faith of the holy people, who guard the injunctions of God and the faith of Jesus. Then I heard a voice from the sky say, write this, happy are those who die belonging to the Master from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labors because their actions follow them. Now I'll stop here at, that was verse 13. And this is saying, after the description of the people on Zion, and then also before that was the description of the unholy Trinity. And so this is in contrast and saying, don't worship the beast, don't take the mark, you'll be doomed if you do. And this is what you should do instead. And so it also is briefly mentioning the fall of Babylon. There will be more about that later. But verse 9 is where it warns people not to take those images. There is no hope for you. You will be in torment forever. And people say, well, how can a loving God do this? And we should also remember there are people who say only the God of the Old Testament is bad, and Jesus is the God of the New Testament, and he's good. But this is the New Testament here. This is prophecies yet to come, and the Lamb is involved in all of this, opened the seals and so forth, and that Lamb is Jesus, the Messiah, of course, and so we can't do good cop, bad cop with the Bible. And so they will say, well, this loving God shouldn't be doing this torment, but we're being hypocrites when we say things like that, because don't we wish judgment, justice, and vengeance on those who have done us wrong? Then we rightly should. Otherwise, there is no justice. There is no compensation for victims. And many times, especially atheists, have a tendency to say, where is God to prevent this horrible thing? Horrible things are happening all the time, and there are more in the news every day, and God doesn't step in, and so the atheists blame him for not acting. Well, here he is acting and paying everyone back for what they've done, and they still hate him. It doesn't matter whether God withholds his hand of judgment and patience, as it says in 2 Peter, or whether it's here in Revelation where he's dishing it out finally and taking back the earth from the wicked, and they still hate him. Now he's acting. And many of God's own people will die during this time, and God says, be happy about that. Not only are you leaving this wicked place, but you will rest from your labors, because what you did will have eternal consequences. And then it says, what we have the image up here is more specific about in verse 14. Then suddenly there was a white cloud, and on the cloud sat someone human-like. On his head was a golden victor's crown in his hand, and in his hand was a sharp sickle. Another angel came out of the temple, shouting loudly to the one sitting on the cloud, send out your sickle and reap, for the time has come to reap the shriveled harvest of the earth. So the one sitting on the cloud threw his sickle in the earth and reaped it. That's why there's pictures of grapes there on the screen. Another angel with a sharp sickle came out of the temple in heaven. Then another angel who had authority over the fire came from the altar and shouted to the one with the sharp sickle, "Send out your sickle and pick the clusters from the vine of the earth, because the grapes are ripe." And the angel threw his sickle to the earth and picked the grapes, then threw them into the winepress of God's great rage. The winepress was used outside the city, and blood came out of it to the point where it rose to the height of a horse's bridle for a distance of 184 miles. And this is pretty much the end of the visions. The next chapter gets into the final bowl judgments. But back to 14 through the end of this chapter, verse 20, we have God himself on the throne, and he also has a victor's crown. But it says someone human-like, so we're probably looking at Jesus in his glorified form. The lamb is reminiscent of his sacrifice that made him worthy to open the seals. Now he is showing his divinity. And then reaping the earth, this is where you get the phrase, the grapes of wrath. That's where this comes from. And even though the fictional story really has little to do with this, it's just where the phrase comes from. So reaping the earth and trampling the grapes was another song, at least in the U.S., the Battle Hymn of the Republic, about the trampling the grapes of wrath. And this is a particular place that says outside the city. The city is Jerusalem. I'm pretty sure almost all commentators agree that the city referenced here is not Babylon, it's Jerusalem. And outside of the city is where this winepress, or this crucible, you might call it, where God is crushing rebellion, and there is just massive bloodshed. That's what this signifies, just massive bloodshed. And so we see that these visions that have come after the seals, after the trumpets, are all about things that have happened, things that are taking place now, things that will happen, which is a theme through Revelation. And so we see things, little hints of things that are about to happen, and also that there are many wars throughout Revelation as well. So on the screen on the left side, I'm going to go to the downloads portion and show the end times prophecy chart, where you can see where we are, sort of a "you are here" map. Right now, of course, in actual time at the present, we're before the red box. When that happens, when the wrath of God begins, when the church is no longer here, we have sealed judgments that are the beginning of sorrows with the half hour of silence, which everyone guesses at what that means, but we should note the fact that it's different than any of the other sevens of judgments. There is no half hour of silence after the trumpets. And so the seals seem set apart. And so then they're followed by the trumpets, which begin with the 7-year treaty, and we have probably the Gog-Magog war, and all of these cosmic disturbances, etc. And then we got to this midpoint that we looked at today, and references in both testaments to all these things. So we saw the temple opened, the woman and the dragon, the two beasts, the abomination of desolation, which is the idol that everyone has to worship, that defiles the temple in Israel, the mark of the beast, the 144,000 on Zion, and this harvest of the earth. This is all at the midpoint vision. We don't know if it takes any time at all. We just aren't told. And this is where the faithful in Israel see the abomination, this desecration of the temple, with the image, if I can find that image again, image of the image. And when they see that in the temple, they will know they believed the lie that the Antichrist was the actual Christ, or Messiah. They would use that word because Christ is Greek. And so the faithful, a third of them, most likely from other passages in the Old Testament, escape to the place of safety at this point. So all of these things happen. This is probably at the beginning of that, or at least sometime just before the bowl judgments is when the beast has killed the three of the other kings, and has died and risen again. And so this is also when he kills the two witnesses. That is really told more at the seventh trumpet, but we don't know if that's part of the trumpet or this space between. At any rate, the two witnesses have been busy for 3.5 years, and they're also killed. And so all these things together amount to people saying, this has got to be the real God. Look at all these miracles. He rose from the dead. This has got to be the real Messiah. And who can stand against them? And they gladly take his seal or his mark. And it really isn't, in a way it's a seal, but not as you normally think, but it is etched into people's skin. Now we'll see when we get to the bowl judgments in the next video that the first thing that happens is terrible ulcers will break out on everyone who took that mark, and I will speculate as to why, that there's a connection between taking the mark and getting these terrible ulcers, not just because they're a judgment. I think it will have to do with the mark itself having some kind of being marketed as a DNA upgrade, a superhuman X-Men kind of thing, and that the body will reject it. That's my speculation. But as for now, with the signs between the trumpets and the bowls, we've seen all of these things and did not go deep into symbolism because, as I've said, that's too much speculation. But the references under the video will give you all the detail you could possibly want. So, but remember, just going back briefly to the 12 stars and the sign, people will say also that that is the constellation Virgo, and they look for certain comets to appear like a teardrops that she's crying out in labor, etc. And since Genesis said that the luminaries are to serve as signs, among other things, that they speculate that this has to do with this constellation. Well, these alignments have come and gone many times, and people who get really excited when there's a certain alignment of things in this constellation, that somehow this means something's going to happen right now. But the thing about signs, even if it is a sign, is that it's just like being on a road trip and seeing signs for your destination. It may say it's 50 miles ahead. It doesn't mean it's right there. You see the signs before you get there. So, but in this case, these signs are more visions of entities in Revelation. And this one, of course, is very clearly, because of the scripture we were looking at in the Old Testament, very clearly of the dragon hating Israel, the woman, and her offspring, the Messiah, and the rest of her offspring. It snaps you back from the past to identify it to this future in Revelation where it goes off to ransack Israel. So hopefully this isn't too confusing or too depressing, as I've said many times, as I also put the gospel message under the description as well. Jesus said, pray that you may escape all these things, and you can. But that shouldn't be your primary motivation to be saved. It should be that you want to spend eternity in God's family. It's an offer of adoption, of reconciliation, that no one will force on you, and you accept it or reject it freely. As the saying goes, while we're in this life, we can either say to God, thy will be done, or at the judgment, God will say to us, thy will be done, and send you away because you didn't want to be in his household. And where do you go to get away from God? So there aren't other choices. It's not because God hates anyone. The scriptures say that God is not willing that any perish, but that all come to repentance, which is to change your mind about him and accept Jesus' sacrifice on your behalf so you can be adopted by God and spend eternity with him instead of suffering his wrath. And again, as it comes to views on how long the body of Christ, the church, is here, as it's been said many times, the church has always in some part of the world been persecuted and suffered horribly. That's not what the rapture is about. The rapture is all about what God promises, that we won't suffer his wrath. So the question is, when does his wrath begin? I believe it begins with the first seal, since Jesus is opening the seals and he is God, and it causes bad things to happen on the earth. Therefore, it's the wrath of God. So it begins there, so we must be gone before that. But these things are very near. We're seeing the signs of the New World Government, the open worship of Satan, the general dark, evil condition of the hearts of many people around the world. And yet, through all of this, we see that God won't let things happen before their time. And he's waiting to bring justice so that more people will turn to him before he must rain down his wrath and finally put an end to all these atrocities. So you can choose, while you're still living here, to accept or reject that offer, but you do not, if you think things have been bad now and up to this point, you do not want to know the wrath of God. So hopefully that's what these studies on Revelation will do. They're not to scare you. They're to use this knowledge of what's coming to get your attention so that you will consider what Jesus did for you. As the scripture says, he died for us while we were still sinners. So it isn't about how good or bad anybody is. It's about who you're aligning yourself with. You can choose God or Satan, and there's no other choices. That's just how it is. So if you want to suffer Satan's fate, you can freely choose that. God will reluctantly tell you, your will be done. But while there's still time, I suggest not being one of those people who has to live through the wrath of God. Thanks for listening.